In a small, quiet town nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, there lived a young woman named Emily. She was known for her adventurous spirit and insatiable curiosity, traits that often led her into places others avoided. The townsfolk admired her boldness but sometimes shook their heads in concern, warning her about the dangers of wandering too far or poking into things better left alone. But Emily didn't care. To her, every mystery was a puzzle waiting to be solved, every shadow an invitation to explore. One crisp autumn afternoon, as golden leaves swirled in the cool breeze, Emily decided to visit an old cemetery on the outskirts of town. It was a place she had heard about from her grandmother's stories, a forgotten graveyard hidden deep within the woods where no one dared to go anymore. Her grandmother had described it as eerie, yet beautiful, with crumbling tombstones and ivy-covered mausoleums that whispered secrets of the past. Intrigued by the idea, Emily packed a small backpack with essentials, a flashlight, a notebook, and a bottle of water, and set off on her adventure. The path to the cemetery was overgrown, and Emily had to push aside thick branches and step carefully over roots snaking across the ground. As she walked, the sounds of the town faded behind her, replaced by the rustling of leaves and the occasional call of a distant bird. The air grew colder, and a strange stillness settled around her. By the time she reached the cemetery gates, the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape. Standing at the entrance, Emily felt a mix of excitement and unease. The iron gates were rusty and partially collapsed, hanging crookedly on their hinges. Beyond them lay rows of weathered tombstones, tilted at odd angles and covered in moss. Some had names barely visible beneath layers of grime, while others had crumbled entirely, leaving only fragments behind. The sight sent a shiver down her spine, but she pushed forward, stepping cautiously onto the cracked stone path that wound through the graves. As she wandered deeper into the cemetery, Emily noticed how silent it was. There were no birds chirping, no insects buzzing, just the soft crunch of her boots against dry leaves. The atmosphere felt heavy, almost oppressive, as if the weight of countless years hung in the air. Despite this, she couldn't help but marvel at the beauty of the place. The setting sun bathed the scene in hues of orange and red, highlighting the intricate carvings on some of the older monuments. Each grave seemed to tell its own story, frozen in time. After walking for what felt like hours, Emily came upon something unusual, a decrepit mausoleum tucked away behind overgrown bushes. Its stone walls were cracked and crumbling, and vines snaked their way up to the roof, clinging stubbornly to the structure. A wrought iron door stood slightly ajar, creaking softly in the wind. Something about it drew her in like an invisible thread pulling her closer. Though part of her wanted to turn back, her curiosity got the better of her and she stepped inside. The interior of the mausoleum was dark and musty, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. Light filtered weakly through grimy windows, creating dim patches on the floor. Dust motes floated lazily in the beams and cobwebs clung to every surface. Emily moved slowly, her footsteps echoing softly against the stone walls. Her eyes scanned the room, taking in the faded inscriptions carved into the walls and the shelves lined with urns and relics from another era. But then, something caught her eye. A wooden coffin resting against one wall. It looked ancient, its surface splintered and warped with age. Unlike the other items in the mausoleum which seemed to belong here, the coffin appeared out of place as if it had been hastily shoved into the corner. Emily's heart began to race. Why would someone leave a coffin here? Was it empty? Or did it hold something or someone inside? Her mind buzzed with questions, but before she could second-guess herself, she found herself standing in front of the coffin. Hesitant at first, she reached out and touched the lid. It was cold and rough under her fingers, sending another shiver down her spine. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the lid aside, revealing the contents within. At first, all she saw was darkness, a void that seemed to swallow the little light available. Then slowly, details began to emerge. Inside the coffin lay not a skeleton or dusty remains but a bundle wrapped tightly in yellowed fabric. Her pulse quickened as she stared at it, unsure whether to feel relieved or even more unsettled. Carefully, she reached in and pulled the bundle out, unwrapping it layer by layer. What she found inside shocked her to the core. A small leather-bound book, its cover embossed with intricate designs. Flipping it open, she discovered pages filled with handwritten notes, sketches, and cryptic symbols. The handwriting was hurried, almost frantic, and the content made no immediate sense. Emily's mind raced. Who had left this here? What did these writings mean? And why had someone gone through so much trouble to hide them inside a coffin? She flipped through the pages, each one more fascinating than the last. Maps of unfamiliar places, formulas resembling alchemical experiments, and personal entries describing fears, hopes, and warnings about the veil and those who watch. The tone grew increasingly desperate as she progressed, culminating in a final entry that simply read, "If you find this, burn it." Despite the ominous warning, Emily couldn't bring herself to destroy the book. Instead, she tucked it into her backpack, determined to uncover its secrets. Little did she know, this discovery would lead her down a path filled with danger, mystery, and revelations far beyond anything she could have imagined. For now, though, she stood in the dim light of the mausoleum, clutching the journal tightly, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. Whatever lay ahead, she knew one thing for certain: her life would never be the same again. Emily left the mausoleum with the mysterious journal tucked safely in her backpack, her mind swirling with questions. As she made her way back through the cemetery, the fading sunlight painted the sky in deep shades of purple and orange, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch unnaturally across the ground. The air grew colder, and an unsettling feeling settled over her, as though unseen eyes were watching her every move. She quickened her pace, eager to leave the eerie atmosphere of the graveyard behind. Once home, Emily locked herself in her room, pulling the curtain shut to block out the encroaching darkness outside. Sitting at her desk, she carefully opened the journal again, flipping through its brittle pages. The handwriting was cramped and hurried, filled with scribbles and crossed-out words that hinted at the writer's growing desperation. Some entries were written in ink so faded it was barely legible, while others were scrawled in bold strokes, as if the author had been gripped by panic. The first few pages contained detailed observations about nature, descriptions of plants, animals, and celestial patterns. But soon the tone shifted. The writer began talking about the barrier, a mysterious force that separated the living world from something beyond. At first, Emily thought it might be a metaphor, perhaps referring to death or the afterlife. But as she read further, it became clear that the writer believed this barrier was real, a tangible boundary between dimensions, guarded by entities they referred to as watchers. Intrigued and slightly unnerved, Emily continued reading. The writer described experiments designed to test the limits of human perception, using strange devices and rituals to glimpse what lay on the other side of the barrier. Diagrams accompanied these notes, showing intricate machines made of copper wires, crystals, and gears. There were also sketches of symbols etched into stone tablets, each one labeled with cryptic names like Key of Shadows and Sigil of Passage. It all sounded like something out of a fantasy novel, yet the precision and detail suggested the writer truly believed in their work. As the hours passed, Emily found herself drawn deeper into the journal's contents. One entry caught her attention, a mention of Dr. Elias Grayson, a name she vaguely recognized from local legends. According to the stories her grandmother used to tell, Grayson had been a brilliant but reclusive scientist who vanished under mysterious circumstances nearly a century ago. People whispered that he had dabbled in forbidden knowledge, conducting experiments that blurred the line between science and the supernatural. Could this journal belong to him? If so, what had driven him to hide it inside a coffin? Determined to find answers, Emily decided to dig deeper. She spent the next day visiting the town library, poring over old newspapers and archives for any information about Grayson. After hours of searching, she finally uncovered a faded article from the early 1900s. The headline read, "Local scientist vanishes without trace, lab destroyed in mysterious fire." The accompanying photo showed a stern-looking man with sharp features and piercing eyes, Dr. Elias Grayson. The article mentioned his groundbreaking research in physics and chemistry, but noted that many of his colleagues considered his later work eccentric and dangerous. No one knew exactly what he had been studying in the years leading up to his disappearance, though rumors suggested it involved attempts to communicate with the dead. Armed with this new knowledge, Emily returned home and resumed her investigation of the journal. She noticed that several entries referenced specific locations around town, places where Grayson claimed to have conducted experiments. One entry described a hidden laboratory beneath an old mill near the edge of the forest. Another mentioned a cavern system deep within the hills, said to hold ancient carvings linked to the barrier. Each clue seemed to point toward a larger mystery, one that Grayson had been trying to unravel before his sudden vanishing. The more Emily read, the more she realized how obsessed Grayson had become with his research. His writings revealed a man consumed by both wonder and fear, torn between his desire to unlock the secrets of the universe and his dread of what might happen if he succeeded. In one particularly chilling passage, he wrote, "They are watching me now. I can feel their presence whenever I approach the barrier. They do not want me here, yet they permit my experiments. Why? What do they seek?" The words sent a shiver down Emily's spine. Who or what were these watchers? And why had they allowed Grayson to continue his work? That night, unable to sleep, Emily sat by her window, staring at the moonlit landscape outside. Her thoughts kept returning to the journal and the strange events surrounding it. Was it possible that Grayson's experiments had somehow breached the barrier, allowing something unnatural to enter the world? Or was it all just the ramblings of a madman, lost to obsession and paranoia? Either way, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being pulled into something far bigger than herself. The next morning, Emily decided to follow the clues in the journal. Her first stop was the old mill, located at the edge of the forest. The building was in ruins, its wooden frames sagging and covered in ivy. A weathered sign hung crookedly above the entrance, reading, "Grayson Mill, closed indefinitely." Ignoring the warning, Emily stepped inside, her flashlight cutting through the gloom. The interior was damp and musty, with piles of rotting wood and rusted machinery scattered everywhere. Following the journal's description, she searched for a trapdoor hidden beneath a pile of debris. After some effort, she found it, a heavy wooden hatch embedded in the floor. With great difficulty, she managed to pry it open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Her heart raced as she descended, the beam of her flashlight illuminating the walls lined with damp stone. At the bottom, she discovered a small chamber filled with remnants of Grayson's lab, shattered glass vials, charred notebooks, and fragments of mechanical devices. Among the wreckage, she found a partially intact map rolled up in a corner. Unfurling it, she saw that it depicted various locations around town, each marked with symbols similar to those in the journal. Over the next few days, Emily visited each site listed on the map, uncovering pieces of Grayson's legacy. At an abandoned church, she found a collection of journals detailing his early experiments. In a secluded cave, she discovered carvings identical to those sketched in the journal, glowing faintly in the dim light. Each discovery brought her closer to understanding the scope of Grayson's work and the dangers it posed. Yet the deeper she delved, the more uneasy she felt. Strange occurrences began to plague her dreams, vivid visions of shadowy figures whispering in languages she didn't understand. During the day, she noticed fleeting movements in her peripheral vision, as though someone, or something, was always just out of sight. Despite her growing unease, Emily pressed on, driven by a mix of curiosity and determination. She couldn't ignore the sense that she was meant to find the journal, that fate had led her to this moment for a reason. Whatever Grayson had uncovered, whatever forces he had unleashed, she knew she had to confront them head-on. Little did she realize, however, that the final piece of the puzzle awaited her back where it all began, in the mausoleum where she had first opened the coffin. As Emily prepared to return to the cemetery, she felt a mixture of excitement and dread. She had pieced together much of the story, but the biggest question remained unanswered. What exactly had Grayson summoned when he breached the barrier? And what role would she play in resolving the consequences of his actions? Clutching the journal tightly, she steeled herself for what lay ahead, knowing that the truth was closer than ever, and that it might come at a price she wasn't ready to pay. Emily stood at the edge of the cemetery once again, her breath visible in the cold night air. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie silver glow over the rows of crumbling tombstones. She tightened her grip on the flashlight in one hand and the leather-bound journal in the other, feeling a mix of determination and apprehension. Returning to the mausoleum felt like stepping into the heart of a storm. She knew she was walking towards something dangerous, but there was no turning back now. The clues Grayson had left behind pointed unmistakably to this place as the epicenter of his experiments, and Emily was certain that whatever answer she sought lay hidden within its shadowy confines. Pushing open the creaking iron gate, she made her way through the overgrown path, her boots crunching against the frost-covered ground. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves stirred by the wind. Shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally long, twisting and shifting as if alive. Every step brought her closer to the decrepit mausoleum, its stone walls looming larger with each passing moment. Her pulse quickened as she approached the entrance, half expecting something or someone to emerge from the darkness. Inside, the air was even colder than before, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and decay. The dim light from her flashlight revealed the same grimy windows, cobweb-covered shelves, and cracked stone floor she remembered from her first visit. But this time, everything felt different. The atmosphere was heavier, charged with an almost electric tension. Emily's skin prickled as though unseen eyes were watching her every move. Ignoring the creeping sense of dread, she moved deeper into the room, heading straight for the wooden coffin tucked against the far wall. Kneeling beside it, Emily placed the journal carefully on the ground and examined the coffin more closely. Its splintered surface bore faint carvings that she hadn't noticed during her initial discovery, symbols etched into the wood that matched those in the journal. They glowed faintly under the beam of her flashlight, pulsating softly as though alive. Her fingers trembled as she traced the markings, feeling an inexplicable warmth emanating from them. It was as if the coffin itself was responding to her presence, awakening after decades of dormancy. Flipping through the journal once more, Emily searched for any mention of these symbols. Near the end, she found a passage describing a ritual meant to stabilize the barrier and banish intrusions. Beneath the instructions were warnings written in bold, jagged strokes. Do not attempt without proper preparation. The watchers are drawn to instability. If they breach the veil, all will be lost. Her stomach churned as she read the words, but curiosity pushed her forward. What did Grayson mean by intrusions? And who, or what, were these watchers? Determined to uncover the truth, Emily followed the steps outlined in the journal. She gathered materials scattered around the mausoleum, candles, matches, and fragments of chalk, and began drawing a circle on the floor. Using the diagrams in the journal as a guide, she inscribed symbols along the perimeter, mimicking the ones carved into the coffin. As she worked, the temperature in the room dropped sharply, causing her breath to mist in the air. A low hum filled the space, growing louder with each completed symbol until it reverberated through her bones. When the circle was complete, Emily stepped inside, clutching the journal tightly. Following the final instruction, she lit the candles placed at cardinal points within the design and recited the incantation written in Grayson's hurried scrawl. The words felt foreign on her tongue, ancient and powerful, as though they carried weight beyond mere sound. At first, nothing happened. Then slowly the symbols on the floor began to glow, their light spreading outward until the entire mausoleum was bathed in an otherworldly radiance. The hum grew into a deafening roar, and the air shimmered as though reality itself were bending. Shadows twisted and writhed across the walls, taking on shapes that defied logic. Elongated limbs, gaping maws, and glowing eyes that seemed to pierce through her very soul. Emily's heart pounded wildly as she realized the Watchers had arrived. They hovered just outside the circle, their forms flickering between solidity and translucence, exuding an aura of menace and sorrow. Despite their terrifying appearance, Emily sensed no malice in their gaze, only sadness and exhaustion, as if they had been guarding the barrier for far too long. Summoning her courage, Emily addressed them, her voice trembling but resolute. "Why are you here? What do you want?" For a moment there was silence. Then one of the figures stepped closer, its form stabilizing slightly. Though it had no mouth, Emily heard its response clearly in her mind, a deep, resonant voice that echoed with age and authority. "We are guardians tasked with protecting your world from forces you cannot comprehend. Your kind has always sought knowledge beyond their reach, breaching barriers not meant to be crossed. When Elias Grayson disturbed the veil, he weakened it, allowing fragments of the void to seep into your realm." Emily's mind raced as she processed the entity's words. So Grayson's experiments hadn't merely been academic pursuits. They had torn a hole in the fabric of reality, inviting chaos into the world. She thought of the strange occurrences she'd experienced since finding the journal, the whispers in her dreams, the fleeting shadows, the overwhelming sense of being watched. All of it made sense now. These weren't random phenomena. They were symptoms of the damage Grayson had caused. "What can I do to fix it?" Emily asked, her voice steadier this time. The Watcher hesitated before responding. "The journal contains power, a fragment of the void tethered to your world. Destroy it, and the rift will begin to heal. But beware. Doing so will erase all traces of its knowledge, including the understanding you've gained. Are you prepared to let go?" Emily's heart sank. She had come so far, uncovered so much, only to be faced with losing it all. Yet, as she looked into the Watcher's sorrowful eyes, she understood the gravity of her choice. Keeping the journal would mean preserving dangerous secrets that could tempt others to repeat Grayson's mistakes. Destroying it was the only way to ensure the safety of her world, even if it meant sacrificing her own curiosity. Tears welled up in her eyes as she nodded. "I'll do it." The Watcher inclined its head, a gesture of gratitude. "Then act swiftly. The longer the journal remains intact, the greater the risk." With shaking hands, Emily retrieved a lighter from her pocket and knelt beside the journal. For a moment she hesitated, running her fingers over the embossed cover. Each page held a piece of Grayson's life, his hopes, fears, and discoveries. To destroy it felt like erasing him entirely, consigning his legacy to oblivion. But deep down she knew it was the right thing to do. Taking a deep breath, she set the journal ablaze. Flames licked hungrily at the edges of the pages, consuming the cryptic symbols and frantic notes in seconds. The light from the fire grew brighter, filling the mausoleum with a blinding brilliance. The Watchers let out a collective sigh, their forms dissolving into wisps of smoke as the barrier stabilized. The oppressive weight in the air lifted, replaced by a profound sense of peace. When the flames finally died down, all that remained of the journal was a pile of ash. Emily sat back on her heels, exhausted but relieved. She felt a pang of loss, but also a quiet satisfaction, knowing she had done what needed to be done. As she extinguished the candles and stepped out of the circle, the mausoleum returned to its previous state, silent, still, and unremarkable. Leaving the cemetery, Emily glanced back one last time. The moonlight illuminated the graves, casting soft shadows that no longer seemed menacing. She walked home under the starlit sky, her mind clear for the first time in weeks. Though the journal was gone, the lessons it had taught her remained etched in her memory. She had learned that some truths are better left buried, not out of fear but out of respect for the delicate balance holding the world together. In the days that followed, Emily resumed her normal routine, though she couldn't shake the feeling that she had changed somehow. She became more cautious, more aware of the boundaries between curiosity and recklessness. Yet she also felt a renewed sense of purpose, vowing to use her experiences to help others navigate the mysteries of life without crossing dangerous lines. Little did she know, however, that her encounter with the Watchers had left an indelible mark, one that would shape her future in ways she couldn't yet imagine. In the weeks following her encounter with the Watchers, Emily tried to return to her everyday life. She went back to work at the local bookstore, attended community events, and even joined a hiking group to keep herself busy. On the surface, everything seemed normal, but deep down she couldn't escape the lingering effects of what she had experienced. The journal was gone, its secrets reduced to ash, but the memories, and the lessons it had taught her, remained vivid in her mind. First, Emily thought destroying the journal would bring closure. She had done what needed to be done, sealing the rift Grayson had created and restoring balance to the barrier. Yet, as days turned into weeks, she began noticing subtle changes, not just in herself, but in the world around her. Strange occurrences that had once frightened her now felt almost familiar, like echoes of something she couldn't quite explain. Shadows moved differently under certain lights. Whispers seemed to drift through empty rooms, and dreams carried fragments of symbols she recognized from the journal. It was as though the void Grayson had disturbed had left an imprint on her, tying her to forces she still didn't fully understand. One evening, while organizing books at the store, Emily stumbled upon an old volume tucked away in a dusty corner. Its title caught her eye: The Veil Between Worlds, Folklore and Forbidden Knowledge. Curiosity piqued, she opened it and began flipping through the pages. To her astonishment, she found references to concepts eerily similar to those in Grayson's journal, the barrier, the Watchers, and even mentions of rituals meant to stabilize or breach it. The book wasn't written by Grayson, nor did it mention him directly, but its content resonated deeply with her experiences. It was as if someone else had glimpsed the same truths he had sought, and had recorded their findings centuries ago. Emily borrowed the book and spent hours poring over its contents at home. Unlike Grayson's frantic notes, this text was calm and measured, written by someone who viewed the barrier not as a challenge to overcome, but as a sacred boundary deserving respect. The author described the Watchers as ancient beings tasked with maintaining cosmic order, guardians who punished only those who disrupted the natural flow of existence. They weren't malevolent, they were simply doing their job. This perspective gave Emily a new understanding of her encounter. Perhaps the Watchers hadn't been angry with her. They had merely been fulfilling their duty. As she read further, Emily discovered accounts of other individuals throughout history who had attempted to cross the barrier. Some had succeeded briefly, gaining glimpses of realms beyond human comprehension, while others had paid dearly for their hubris. One story particularly stood out, a tale of a woman named Lydia Hawthorne who lived in the late 1800s. According to the book, Lydia had performed a ritual strikingly similar to the one Emily had enacted in the mausoleum. Like Grayson, she had uncovered forbidden knowledge, but unlike him, she had willingly destroyed her findings, sacrificing her own ambitions for the greater good. The parallels between Lydia's story and her own were impossible to ignore. Both women had faced choices that tested their resolve, balancing personal curiosity against the well-being of others, and both had ultimately chosen to let go, erasing dangerous secrets rather than preserving them. Reading about Lydia filled Emily with a sense of kinship, as though she were part of a long lineage of people entrusted with protecting the fragile line between worlds. But the more Emily learned, the more questions arose. If Grayson's experiments had weakened the barrier, why hadn't anyone noticed sooner? Why had the Watchers chosen her to intervene, and what role did she truly play in all of this? These thoughts gnawed at her, keeping her awake at night. She began to wonder if destroying the journal had truly solved the problem, or if it had merely delayed the inevitable. Her doubts were compounded when strange events started happening again. At first they were small things, objects moving slightly out of place, faint whispers drifting through the air, fleeting shadows darting across her vision. Then came the dreams. Vivid and unsettling, they transported her to places she didn't recognize, vast, desolate landscapes bathed in unnatural light where towering figures loomed in the distance. In these dreams, the watchers appeared frequently, their forms shifting between solidity and transparency. Though they never spoke, their presence conveyed urgency, as if urging her to act. Desperate for answers, Emily returned to the cemetery, one moonlit night. She didn't know what she hoped to find, but something inside her insisted she revisit the mausoleum. As she pushed open the iron gate, she noticed subtle changes in the environment. The air felt thicker, charged with energy, and the usual silence was interrupted by faint rustling sounds that seemed to come from nowhere. Her footsteps echoed louder than before, each step reverberating unnaturally through the stillness. Inside the mausoleum, the coffin remained where she had left it, untouched and undisturbed. But the symbols carved into its surface glowed faintly, pulsating rhythmically like a heartbeat. Emily approached cautiously, her flashlight beam trembling as she examined the markings. They were different now, more intricate, more alive. Leaning closer, she realized they weren't static designs. They shifted and rearranged themselves, forming patterns that matched the ones she had seen in her dreams. A sudden gust of wind extinguished her flashlight, plunging the room into darkness. Panic surged through her, but before she could react, the symbols erupted into light, illuminating the entire space. The glow intensified until it became blinding, forcing Emily to shield her eyes. When she lowered her arm, she saw the Watchers, standing before her once again. Their forms were clearer this time, less shadowy and more defined, exuding an aura of authority and sorrow. One of the Watchers stepped forward, its translucent form shimmering like liquid silver. Again, its voice resonated in her mind, deeper and more resonant than before. You have fulfilled your role, yet the damage persists. The barrier remains fragile, held together by threads that grow thinner with each passing day. You must strengthen it, or risk catastrophe. Emily's heart sank. I thought destroying the journal fixed everything, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It was a necessary step, but not the final one, the Watcher replied. The journal was a fragment of the void, yes, but its destruction released residual energy. That energy lingers, feeding instability. To restore true balance, you must perform another ritual, one far more complex than the last. Fear gripped Emily as she processed the Watcher's words. She had already pushed herself to the brink to close the rift once. Could she endure another confrontation with forces beyond her understanding? What if she failed? The Watcher seemed to sense her hesitation. We do not ask this lightly, nor do we expect you to face it alone. Seek allies among those who understand the weight of your task. Trust your instincts. They will guide you. With that, the Watchers dissolved into mist, leaving Emily alone in the dimly lit mausoleum. Her mind raced as she absorbed their message. Strengthening the barrier wouldn't be easy, but she couldn't abandon the responsibility thrust upon her. She had already sacrificed so much. Turning away now would render her efforts meaningless. Determined to see this through, Emily began researching ways to fortify the barrier. She scoured libraries, consulted obscure texts, and even reached out to academics specializing in folklore and metaphysics. Slowly, she pieced together information about ancient rituals designed to reinforce boundaries between dimensions. Each source emphasized the importance of unity. Rituals required multiple participants working in harmony to channel sufficient energy. Realizing she couldn't complete the task alone, Emily resolved to assemble a team of trusted individuals willing to help. Her first recruit was Sarah, a childhood friend who shared her love of mysteries and had always supported her adventures. Next, she enlisted Mr. Hargrove, the elderly librarian who had introduced her to the book about the Veil. His vast knowledge of mythology proved invaluable, and his calm demeanor provided steady guidance during moments of doubt. Finally, she reached out to Daniel, a local historian fascinated by the town's forgotten legends. Together, they formed an unlikely alliance, united by a common goal: to protect their world from unseen threats. Over the next few weeks, the group met regularly to prepare for the ritual. They studied diagrams, practiced chants, and gathered materials required for the ceremony. Emily took charge, drawing on her experiences with the Watchers and the insights gained from the journal. Despite their differences, the team worked seamlessly, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. Finally, the night of the ritual arrived. Armed with candles, crystals, and protective charms, the group returned to the mausoleum. The air buzzed with anticipation as they arranged themselves in a circle, each holding a designated role in the ceremony. Emily stood at the center, clutching a scroll containing the incantation. As she began reciting the words, the symbols on the coffin flared to life, casting an ethereal glow throughout the chamber. The ritual was grueling, testing their endurance and focus. Voices whispered temptations, urging them to give up, but they persevered, driven by a shared determination. Hours passed in a blur of chanting, gestures, and bursts of energy. Just as exhaustion threatened to overwhelm them, the symbols reached their peak intensity. The aftermath of the ritual left Emily and her companions physically and emotionally drained, yet deeply fulfilled. The mausoleum, once a place of eerie stillness and oppressive energy, now felt serene, almost peaceful. The air was lighter, the shadows softer, and the symbols etched into the coffin had faded to faint imprints, their glow extinguished. It was as if the barrier itself had exhaled, releasing the tension that had plagued it for decades. For the first time in weeks, Emily felt a sense of closure, not just for herself but for the town and perhaps even the world beyond. As the group stepped out of the mausoleum, the night sky greeted them with an unfamiliar clarity. Stars twinkled, brightly above, unobscured by the haze of unease that had hung over the cemetery before. Emily paused at the entrance, glancing back one last time. She couldn't help but wonder if the Watchers were still watching, silently observing from the edges of existence. If they were, she hoped they understood the effort she and her friends had poured into stabilizing the barrier. The thought brought both relief and a tinge of sadness. She realized how much she had grown attached to the idea of these ancient guardians, even though they existed far beyond her comprehension. Walking home under the starlit sky, Emily reflected on everything she had been through. From the moment she opened the abandoned coffin to the final incantation in the ritual, her life had transformed in ways she never imagined. She had faced fear, doubt, and uncertainty, yet emerged stronger and wiser. But more importantly, she had discovered the power of unity and trust. Without Sarah's unwavering support, Mr. Hargrove's wisdom, and Daniel's meticulous research, she doubted she could have succeeded. This realization planted a seed within her, a desire to continue exploring mysteries, not out of reckless curiosity, but with a sense of responsibility and purpose. Over the next few days, Emily noticed subtle changes in her daily life. The strange occurrences that had haunted her since finding the journal, the whispers, the shifting shadows, the vivid dreams, had vanished completely. Even the cemetery seemed less foreboding when she passed by it on her walks. Yet, instead, a feeling disconnected from the supernatural elements she had encountered, she felt oddly grounded. The experience had taught her that while some truths are better left untouched, others demand attention when they threaten the delicate balance of the world. Her newfound perspective didn't go unnoticed by those around her. Sarah teased her about becoming the town's resident ghostbuster, while Mr. Hargrove praised her courage and dedication. Daniel, ever the historian, urged her to document her experiences, believing they might hold value for future generations. At first, Emily hesitated. Writing down what she had seen and done felt like reopening old wounds, but eventually, she agreed. Sharing her story wasn't just about preserving memories. It was about ensuring that no one else would stumble blindly into dangers like Grayson had. As Emily began jotting down notes, she found herself revisiting the lessons she had learned along the way. One of the most profound realizations was the importance of humility. Grayson's downfall hadn't stemmed from his brilliance or ambition. It was his arrogance that had led him astray. He had sought to conquer the unknown rather than respect it, and in doing so, he had unleashed forces he couldn't control. Emily resolved never to make the same mistake. Knowledge, she realized, was a double-edged sword. It could illuminate paths forward, but it could also cut deep if wielded carelessly. Another lesson was the significance of connection. Throughout her journey, Emily had relied heavily on the people around her, whether it was Sarah's encouragement, during moments of doubt, Mr. Hargrove's guidance in deciphering ancient texts, or Daniel's insights into local legends. Each contribution had been essential. The ritual itself had reinforced this truth. The barrier hadn't been stabilized by a single person's efforts, but by the combined strength and determination of the entire group. This understanding made her appreciate the bonds she had formed even more deeply. Despite her progress, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that her encounter with the Watchers wasn't entirely over. Though the barrier was stable, the Watchers' parting words lingered in her mind. "Trust your instincts, they will guide you." What did they mean? Was there something more she needed to do? Or was this simply advice for navigating the rest of her life? She didn't know, but she trusted that the answer would reveal itself in time. In the meantime, Emily threw herself into helping others. Inspired by her own experiences, she began volunteering at community events, mentoring young people interested in science and history, and advocating for the preservation of forgotten places like the cemetery. She believed that understanding the past and respecting its mysteries was key to avoiding mistakes like Grayson's. Her passion and enthusiasm inspired those around her, earning her a reputation as someone who could turn curiosity into action without losing sight of ethics. One evening, while organizing materials for a presentation at the library, Emily stumbled upon another book hidden among the shelves. Its title sent a jolt through her: Guardians of the Veil, Myths and Realities. Intrigued, she flipped it open and began reading. To her astonishment, the book contained detailed accounts of encounters with the Watchers, written by individuals throughout history who claimed to have communicated with them. Some described the Watchers as benevolent protectors, while others viewed them as stern enforcers. What struck Emily most, however, was a recurring theme. The Watchers always appeared when humanity teetered on the brink of chaos, offering guidance to those willing to listen. Reading the stories, Emily felt a renewed sense of kinship with these historical figures. Like her, they had been chosen or perhaps tested by the Watchers. Their courage and sacrifices reminded her that she wasn't alone in bearing the weight of such responsibilities. More importantly, the book hinted at the possibility of ongoing communication with the Watchers. According to one account, maintaining harmony required constant vigilance, not just one-time interventions. Could this be why the Watchers had told her to trust her instincts? Were they preparing her for a lifelong role as a guardian of sorts? The idea thrilled and terrified her in equal measure. On one hand, she relished the thought of continuing to protect her world from unseen threats. On the other, she feared the toll it might take on her personal life. Balancing ordinary responsibilities with extraordinary duties wouldn't be easy, but Emily knew she couldn't turn away. The Watchers had entrusted her with knowledge few others possessed, and she owed it to them, and to herself, to honor that trust. Determined to embrace her new path, Emily decided to create a network of allies dedicated to safeguarding the barrier. Drawing inspiration from the team that had helped her perform the ritual, she reached out to like-minded individuals across the region: historians, scientists, spiritualists, and adventurers, all united by a shared commitment to protecting the delicate balance between worlds. Together, they formed a loose coalition, meeting regularly to share information, discuss potential threats, and prepare for any challenges that might arise. Through this work, Emily discovered a deeper sense of purpose than she had ever known. No longer was she merely satisfying her curiosity, she was actively contributing to the greater good. Each meeting, each discovery, and each collaboration filled her with a quiet joy, knowing that she was part of something larger than herself. And though the road ahead promised uncertainty, she faced it with confidence, armed with the lessons she had learned and the friendships she had forged. Yet even as she embraced her role, Emily remained acutely aware of the fragility of the barrier. She knew that stability was never guaranteed, that complacency could lead to disaster. That awareness kept her vigilant, constantly seeking ways to strengthen the connections between her world and the Watchers. Whether through rituals, research, or simply listening to her instincts, she vowed to remain a steadfast guardian of the veil. As months turned into years, Emily's reputation grew beyond the small town where her journey had begun. People from all walks of life sought her counsel, drawn by her unique blend of practicality and mysticism. Some came seeking answers to personal questions, while others hoped to understand the mysteries of the universe. Regardless of their reasons, Emily welcomed them all, sharing her insights with patience and kindness. Looking back on her journey, Emily realized that opening the abandoned coffin had been both a beginning and an end. It had marked the start of a profound transformation, leading her to confront fears, forge lasting bonds, and uncover truths that transcended human understanding. But it had also closed a chapter in her life, one defined by naivety and reckless curiosity. In its place stood a woman tempered by experience, guided by wisdom, and driven by an unshakable sense of duty. Though the journal was gone, its legacy lived on, not in the secrets it had contained, but in the lives it had touched. Emily often thought about Grayson, wondering if he had ever regretted his choices. She hoped that somewhere, somehow, he had found peace. As for herself, she carried no regrets. Every step of her journey had led her to this moment, to this version of herself, a guardian of the veil, a seeker of truth, and a believer in the power of unity. Years passed, and Emily's life settled into a rhythm she hadn't anticipated when she first opened the abandoned coffin. What had begun as a solitary act of curiosity had evolved into a lifelong mission, one that intertwined her ordinary existence with extraordinary responsibilities. She was no longer just Emily, the curious young woman from the small town. She was now a guardian of sorts, someone who stood between two worlds, ensuring the delicate balance remained intact. Her days were filled with a mix of mundane tasks and extraordinary pursuits. By morning, she worked at the bookstore, recommending novels to customers and organizing shelves. By evening, she met with members of her growing coalition, discussing strategies to monitor and protect the barrier. They called themselves the Veil Keepers, a name inspired by the ancient texts they studied. Each member brought something unique to the group: Sarah's tech-savvy research skills, Mr. Hargrove's encyclopedic knowledge of folklore, Daniel's passion for local history, and others who joined later, each adding their own expertise. Together, they formed a network of vigilance, ready to respond to any signs of instability. Despite her busy schedule, Emily found time to reflect on how far she'd come. The fear that once gripped her heart during her initial encounters with the Watchers had given way to a quiet confidence. She understood now that the Watchers weren't adversaries. They were allies, bound by duty just as she was. Their presence, though intangible, felt constant, like a reassuring hum in the background of her life. Occasionally, she would sense them nearby, especially during moments of decision or doubt. Though they rarely communicated directly, their influence guided her instincts, nudging her toward paths that aligned with the greater good. One crisp autumn afternoon, as golden leaves swirled around the cemetery gates, Emily returned to the mausoleum for the first time since the ritual. It had been years since she last stepped foot inside, but something compelled her to visit. Perhaps it was nostalgia, or perhaps it was the feeling that unfinished business awaited her there. Either way, she couldn't ignore the pull. Pushing open the iron gate, she walked through the familiar rows of weathered tombstones, her boots crunching against the dry leaves. The air carried the same chill it always did, but this time, it felt comforting rather than ominous. When she reached the mausoleum, she paused, taking in its crumbling facade. Vines still clung stubbornly to the stone walls, and the wrought iron door creaked softly in the wind. Pushing it open, she stepped inside. The interior was unchanged. The grimy windows, cobweb-covered shelves, and cracked stone floor looked exactly as she remembered. But the atmosphere was different. Gone was the oppressive weight that had once made her skin prickle. Instead, the space felt serene, almost sacred. Standing before the wooden coffin, Emily noticed something new. Fresh carvings etched into its surface. Unlike the faded symbols from before, these were sharp and clear, glowing faintly under the dim light filtering through the windows. Curious, She knelt beside the coffin and examined the markings. They resembled the ones she had seen in her dreams, intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with energy. As she traced them with her fingers, a wave of warmth spread through her body, filling her with a sense of calm. Then, without warning, the room grew brighter, and the watchers materialized before her. This time, their forms were solid, their features distinct. They stood tall and imposing, exuding an aura of authority and grace. One of them stepped forward, its eyes locking onto hers. Its voice resonated in her mind, deeper and more resonant than ever before. "You have done well, Emily. The barrier is strong because of your efforts." Tears welled up in her eyes as she listened. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But why are you here? Is there something else I need to do?" The watcher inclined its head slightly. "The barrier is stable, but the world is vast, and threats can arise in unexpected ways. Your role as a guardian does not end here. You must continue to watch, to listen, and to act when necessary." Emily nodded, though a part of her felt overwhelmed. "I understand. But how will I know what to do?" "Trust your instincts," the watcher replied, echoing its earlier advice. "They have served you well thus far. And remember, you are not alone. The Veil Keepers will aid you, as will we when the need arises." With that, the watchers began to fade, their forms dissolving into shimmering mist. Before they disappeared, completely, one of them added, "Your journey has only just begun, Emily. Embrace it with courage and wisdom." When the room returned to its usual dimness, Emily sat back on her heels, her mind racing. The watcher's words echoed in her thoughts, stirring a mix of excitement and apprehension. She had known her work wasn't over, but hearing it confirmed made it feel more real. Still, she welcomed the challenge. Over the years, she had learned that purpose often came disguised as responsibility, and she wouldn't trade hers for anything. As she left the mausoleum, Emily felt a renewed sense of determination. Whatever lay ahead, whether it was protecting the barrier, uncovering hidden truths, or guiding others, she was ready. Her experiences had taught her that while some mysteries were meant to remain unsolved, others demanded attention when they threatened the fabric of reality. Balancing curiosity with caution, she vowed to walk this path with integrity and humility. Back in town, Emily threw herself into her work with renewed vigor. She expanded the Veil Keepers' reach, connecting with similar groups across the country, and even internationally. Through conferences, online forums, and collaborative projects, they shared knowledge and resources, strengthening their collective ability to safeguard the barrier. Emily became a respected figure within these circles, admired not just for her bravery but for her willingness to share credit and empower others. Her personal life flourished as well. Sarah remained her closest confidant, always ready with a listening ear or a dose of humor. Mr. Hargrove continued to mentor her, his wisdom shaping her approach to leadership. Daniel, meanwhile, became her partner in both adventure and romance, their shared passion for history and mystery deepening their bond. Together, they explored forgotten places, documented legends, and built a life rooted in mutual respect and trust. Yet despite her happiness, Emily never forgot the weight of her responsibilities. She kept journals of her experiences, not just for herself but for future generations. In them, she recorded everything, from the rituals she had performed to the lessons she had learned. She hoped that someday, someone might read her words and find guidance, just as she had found inspiration in Lydia Hawthorne's story. One evening, as she sat by the fireplace in her cozy home, Emily flipped through one of her journals. The pages were filled with sketches, notes, and reflections, each entry a testament to her growth. Pausing at a drawing of the watchers, she smiled softly. They had become more than guardians to her. They were reminders of the interconnectedness of all things, of the delicate balance that held the world together. Closing the journal, Emily gazed out the window at the starlit sky. She thought about Grayson, wondering if he had ever imagined the ripple effects of his actions. Had he foreseen the chain reaction his experiments would set off? Or had he been too consumed by ambition to consider the consequences? Whatever the case, Emily knew she owed him a debt, not of gratitude, but of resolve. His mistakes had shaped her journey, teaching her the importance of humility and restraint. Looking ahead, Emily embraced the uncertainty of her future. She didn't know what challenges awaited her, but she trusted that she would face them with courage and clarity. Whether confronting unseen threats, mentoring the next generation of veil keepers, or simply living her life with purpose, she was determined to honor the trust placed in her. And so, Emily's story continued, a tapestry woven from threads of curiosity, courage, and connection. Opening the abandoned coffin had been the catalyst for a transformation neither she nor anyone else could have predicted. From that moment, her life had become a testament to the power of choices. To seek knowledge responsibly, to act with compassion, and to stand firm in the face of the unknown. As the fire crackled softly in the hearth and the stars twinkled above, Emily felt a profound sense of peace. She was exactly where she was meant to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. Whatever lay beyond the veil, whatever mysteries lingered in the shadows, she faced them, not with fear, but with hope. For she knew that as long as she trusted her instincts and stayed true to her values, she would continue to shine a light in the darkness, a beacon of balance in an ever-changing world.